Hello and welcome to another edition of the Burnham Brothers College Football Podcast. Actually, our 7th episode, and my name is Pat Burnham, and I'm joined by my brother Shane. Shane, fired up about today's show. What about you?
Lucky number 7. Should be a great show. I'm excited to have these two guys on.
Yeah, and the reason we are excited is we got former Florida State coaches Mickey Andrews and Wally Burnham, and obviously Coach Burnham is our father. So we're looking forward to having these guys on. Thought about doing this for a long time, and it kind of works out. Both Coach Andrews and Coach Burnham played at Alabama for Bear Bryant, coached for Bobby Bowden at Florida State, one of only 4 men that I've known to do both, other being Bobby Johns and Billy Sexton. Coach Andrews and Coach Burnham may know more than 4, but those are the 4 I know about. So we thought with Florida State playing Alabama, it would be fun coming up on August 30th. Be fun to have Coach Andrews and Coach Burnham on and talk a little bit about how they met, a little bit about playing for the Bear, coaching for Bobby, the differences and the similarities between those two, some questions we probably have not had a chance to ask them, but they've got great stories. So without further ado, let's bring in Coach Andrews and Coach Burnham, or as we call him, Dad. Guys, how's it going?
It's going better now.
Yeah, you didn't know you were going to have to do 2 takes today, did you?
It's going to cost you double.
All right, well, listen. Hey, I just heard Shane talk about getting paid. He's going to start buying people lunch before we started taping. So Shane's got you covered this week. Listen. How's everything going, Coach Andrews? How's everything going? You're just a couple miles. You're just a half mile from me down the street on Shamrock.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Well, about good as I could expect, for an old man.
Yeah.
I've just got the typical problems that you have getting older. Not easy. I started to say it's not fun, but I guess as long as you've got 2 feet on the ground still, you got to make it fun.
That's right. We appreciate you guys coming on and having some fun with us. Dad, how's everything at the lake up in Lake Lanier?
It's cool and nice and windy. It was 63 about an hour ago. It's high of 68 today up here in the mountains. So everything's good.
All right, good. Well, listen, there's a lot of places we could start. We could start at y'all coached together at 4 different places: Livingston, which is now West Alabama, North Alabama, the Arizona Wranglers of the USFL, then obviously most famously with Florida State for 9 years, from 85 to 93 when y'all won the first national championship. So let's kind of start at the beginning. Y'all were both signed with the same recruiting class at the University of Alabama and Bear Bryant. Tell us a little bit about when do y'all first remember meeting each other and what that was like? And Coach, we'll start with you, Coach Andrews.
Well, if my memory serves me well, and it don't always do that, I think the first time that I met Wally was in the All-Star game. He played. He was selected by the North team, and I was selected by the South team. So we played against each other, and of course, like you said, we were freshmen at the University of Alabama in 1960, and that's where I first met him. And actually, we weren't roommates; we were neighbors. We lived in the old dorm. I think it was the Freedman Hall, wasn't it, Wally?
That's correct.
Yeah, and I run with Jim Blair, and he lived right just next door across the hall from us. And we just happened to become really good friends during that time and have been friends. I don't know how many years that is now, but we still enjoy getting together and doing things together.
Dad, what do you remember? What are you meeting Coach Andrews?
Well, about the same. We played against each other in that game in August 1960. Then we came back, to report to Alabama. But I met him and talked to him during the recruiting process when we had Alabama had a big recruiting weekend. I guess it was maybe 20 of them. That's big. I don't know. It was for back then, I guess. And we had dinner at Coach Bryant's house. And I remember standing outside on the patio or something where we were all kind of just moving around and striking up a conversation. He did with me or I did with him. I don't know who started it. And we kind of introduced each other and got to know each other a little bit about our background, out by the Ozark and Pell City and stuff like that. And so that's the first time I ever remember just sitting down and talking to Mickey.
As you guys talk about that, I'm curious. I have a memory of being up in the attic when I was a kid and finding Dad's old Foot Locker. And as I opened it up, and I saw a bunch of telegrams. So going through the recruiting process, there were telegrams, which now in today's time would be a DM on Twitter or a DM on Instagram, I guess. Coach Bryant was going to be going into year 3 when you guys were coming there in 1960. He had had success at A&M. He had been at Kentucky. So I'm just curious, did you know who you were going to go play for at the time? It's, hindsight's 2020, but he had a record where he had been established. Just take us through that, your recruitment process, for people that don't understand how competitive it was back then. There were other teams who would try to sway you, and some of the things that went on back then that are still going on today that are now NIL. Do you remember that recruitment at all?
Yeah, it was different, and coaches came to your house and saw you, the assistant coaches and so forth and so on. And then, of course, Coach Bryant always made that visit to you, that last visit before you couldn't visit anymore. And but yeah, we got telegrams wishing you happy birthday, Merry Christmas, and things like that. And every once in a while, if you won a big high school game, which I'll see didn't play in many of those, you get a telegram from Coach Bryant, and things like that. And it was there was NIL going on, but I didn't get part of that. And so it was different and a lot of fun though. Met a lot of great people.
Coach, what remember your recruitment?
Yeah, basically the same thing. I did not remember the telegrams. Maybe you were a better prospect than I was, Wally. Back then, I was a kicker, punter, extra point, field goal, kickoff, all that stuff. And I remember one of the coaches, they went to see me play in a game, I think it was in Abbeville. And on the kickoff, I kicked it out of the end zone. There was a steep gully or whatever behind the fence. And it goes down into the gully. And they had to wait and go get another ball because I don't think they had but one ball out there at that time. And that's when they started picking up a little bit, And I remember Sam Bailey and Bob Ford, a couple of guys coming to the house. In fact, I remember one instance where Diane, my wife, we were on a date. And we were at the drive-in theater. That you didn't have many places to go on a date. You could go downtown to the theater, but you couldn't. About all you could do was hold hands that way. You go to the drive-in, you could smooch a little bit and whatever. So we're sitting there, and I see a shadow come on the window. And somebody knocks on the door there on the window. And I look up, and it was Bob Ford. And I thought to myself, what in the world is going on? So I rolled the window down. Back then, you didn't have power windows, so I rolled it down. And he wanted to know if would I come to Alabama if Billy Nose didn't come. Billy was a great friend, really a great football player, signed with the University of Georgia, and ended up being a great coach and all that. But anyway, I said, well, I hadn't thought about it. I actually we'd planned to go together. But Billy had a cousin, I know he had a uncle that was offensive line coach at the University of Georgia. So he really had more reasons to go to Georgia than I did. And I said, I hadn't really thought about it. I tell him Bob Ford. But yeah, I guess I would. And so I think that's at the point where kind of they broke off with Billy because they had heard he was going to Georgia. But strange things happen during recruiting. I don't ever remember doing that. Wally, did you do anything like that on any recruiting visits or whatever?
No, not really. You mentioned Georgia. I came up for the '59 season opener for Georgia and Alabama as Georgia was recruiting me. And I remember it was a hot day, and they didn't treat you as good back in those days as far as entertainment and feeding you and making sure you had something to drink, and all those kind. You didn't have those girls, chauffeuring you around and things like that. You went on a business trip, really. And but I do remember going to Georgia, and I didn't go many places. I went to Auburn a good bit, and matter of fact, I committed to Auburn the summer before my senior year, and I knew I wasn't going there because I was raised as an Alabama fan. I had two uncles that took me to every Alabama and Auburn game that I can remember, as far back I can remember, because you could go to Birmingham and walk up to the ticket window, buy a ticket, and you could just about sit anywhere you wanted to sit if you got there early enough. And those are the kind of recruiting trips I remember. But people are always nice to you, and of course I visited Alabama several times, just like I did Auburn. And but anyway, I knew I was going to Alabama, and there was never any doubt where I was going.
Do y'all remember the first time you met Coach Bryant? And when you're that age, college football coaches, I remember being young, and Shane's mentioned the fact to some degree we knew you guys a little bit better, but we still looked up to you guys the same way. But football coaches to teenage football players, especially a guy of Coach Bryant's stature, are larger than life. Do you remember the first time you met Coach Bryant and what it was like meeting the Bear for the first time? And Coach Andrews, I'll start with you.
I can't remember the first time. I guess it was probably going up to a ball game, and either before the game or after the game, going into the dressing room, and I think that was the first time that I actually met him. But that's the best I can recall.
Yeah. My two uncles took me. They were the fans, and so they took me wherever I was going to go. So they took me to Alabama. My first visit down there during the football season, and we got there real early. And it was, of course, all the games were like 1 or 2 o'clock at that time. You didn't have many night games at all. And so they had invited my uncles to bring me by Coach Bryant's office, and so we got there early enough we went in and sat down and talked to Coach Bryant, and in that office, big old desk and everything, and that was quite a thrill for me, and probably a bigger thrill for my two uncles because they were pushing me to go to Alabama, and so that was the first time that I really seeing him and talking to him.
Now, a lot of people think that y'all's class at that time was the best class that's ever signed at the University of Alabama up until that point. Who were some of the other guys that were in your class, and what do you remember about those guys?
Go ahead, Mick.
Well, I remember Joe Namath was the year behind us. I'm just trying to remember some people. I don't know how many big time stars that we actually had there at that time, Wally, that was in that class. Do you recall? Go ahead, Wally.
That did all the had the square toed kick and shoe, and there's a kickoff field goal extra point guy. He was, he was a pretty big star, and I remember
Davis. What?
Who's that?
That wasn't his last name, Davis.
Yeah. Tim Davis.
I remember him kicking 4 field goals in the Sugar Bowl to win it.
Yeah, he did. He was a good kicker. And
Dink
Wall was down your area.
Yeah.
You and he came out of the same area down in South Alabama. And, I don't know how successful he was at the end, but he was a big name back in the end. And was it Butch Henry, the tight end?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, that, we had, there was a few that became stars.
Yeah. I think more than anything, and we of course didn't have star ratings back then, but there wasn't a whole lot of what you'd call 5 stars. But there were a bunch of solid 4 stars and high 3s. And of course, the thing, that at Alabama, if you wasn't tough, you wasn't going to play. And of course,
true.
Each year they kept adding a little more ability. I remember Sloan and Stabler and Joe, came after us. But they would be the more 5 stars. But, to think about it, toughness and intensity was at an unbelievable level there at the university at that time. And it was an ever-play deal.
Yeah, and I've heard growing up. I've heard a lot of stories, and I mentioned something when we tried to record this the first time. I can remember even 8 years ago sitting down at lunch with you guys on Appalachian Parkway and hearing a story I've never heard before about how tough it was to play at Alabama. And y'all were talking about off-season and conditioning drills and how y'all were. One of you was coming down the stairs to go outside. One of you was going up the stairs to go inside to the mat drills. Y'all were switching stations, and y'all shared a moment there on the stairs with each other. I want y'all to tell that story. Then you've got the story. I've heard the story about the pit and having to fight your way out of the pit. And then there's the famous story about you guys were a great freshman class, and they had a great team that would a varsity team. And of course, when you guys were freshmen, you couldn't play. You had to play on the freshman team. You weren't eligible for varsity, but Coach Bryant made y'all scrimmage the starters, and that led to another scrimmage, and then led to some gassers after practice. So some of those stories about how tough it was and what it was like playing for Coach Bryant. And Dad, I'll let you start. I know you're the one that told me the off-season conditioning story where you were running past Coach Andrews and y'all shared some words together. You still there?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
It's typical off-season mat drills and a few other things, and they did it in a gym above the coach's office, the dressing room, and things like that, where everybody you met and had team meetings and all that. And they had us divided up, Mickey and the DBs, wide receivers. They went in one group because there's probably more of those guys than there was any other positional group if you put them together. And best I remember now, Mickey, y'all went first. This was the first time we ever went through this deal. But you guys went first. and you had to go up that spiral staircase. Remember, to get up to the second floor. And so you were coming down, the best of my recollection, and you told me, you said, "Don't go up there." And yeah, you were giving out. You had all you guys, and but it was tough.
That's funny because I thought your group went first, and because what I remember was that you came down those stairs, and I promise you, your butt hit every step.
Oh,
you couldn't even hardly move yourself up. You was hanging on the rail and whatever. And I said, "Well, how about it, Wally?" And you said, "Don't go up there." That was the only thing you said. And there's people coming up behind me, so I had to keep going. I couldn't turn around and go back downstairs. But we had just never been through anything that amounted to the intensity level that they put you through.
Right.
And it was almost like they were trying to get you to quit.
Yeah.
And or to make a decision one way or the other. I'm not going to be ordinary. I'm not going to give ordinary effort. I'm going to put myself in a group of people that nowhere in the country was doing the things that they did to push you to become your very best. And I really think that's the thing that really made us become really good players, because it separated people. You had to make a decision. They wasn't going to leave you on the fence. Usually you come off on one or two sides. And I can remember even after that, Wally, that spring semester, we had a class over at the old PE building. I forget what they called it now. And you checked out your entire football equipment, pads, shoes, helmets, everything. And you put it in lockers over there in the PE building. Right. And we actually, I think it was 3 days a week we practiced, might have been more. We actually got credit for it. They gave you credit for it. And you did everything except line up as a group and scrimmage. But what it amounted to was individual spring practice, getting us ready for spring practice. And I don't remember now if there was a limit on the number of days. If it did, it was probably like, if it wasn't a good day, they didn't count it. Or you'd get started halfway through it and you would start over again. Just go back, warm up, do everything over again.
Yeah.
They wasn't going to let you get by. They wasn't going to condone anything less than the habits that you had to develop to become an elite team.
Yeah.
And I thought that's where it started. And they continued right on through the spring. Do you remember how many days we practiced in the spring? Was there a limit?
You talking about the class at the PE building?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
When spring practice started, we didn't go there anymore.
No.
We moved our equipment back over to the football facility.
Yeah. Well, as soon as the second semester started, we started that class at the PE building.
Yeah.
And plus we had mat drills on 2 days a week. Okay.
That's so I forgot that.
The classes were on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Okay. Right. We had an English class on Saturday. Also, they wouldn't let you go home.
Yeah.
And then we had all season on Monday and Wednesday, or the mat drills those days. Then we went from that straight into spring practice. So we never stopped playing football.
No.
Or conditioning or whatever.
How much of the Florida State off-season conditioning program y'all installed at Florida State in '85 was taken from your experience at Alabama?
I would say most of it, wouldn't you, Mickey?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. All right.
Is that
It was more about creating discipline, learning how to strain. Straining is not easy because it hurts. And if you're strong enough to strain yourself, you're exceptional. I mean, really exceptional. So what you had to do, you'd get to a point, well, I don't think I can go another step. And you had to trust your coach to let him strain you. And I thought that's something that we learned there at the university. And we both continued to do in our coaching career. And I really believe that was one of the main factors that separated Alabama's success, Florida State's success. When you stop and think about it, those 14 years that we had at Florida State, called the dynasty years, nobody's ever done that before. You're in the top 14 years in a row in the entire country. I think it was 10 or more games, 14 years. And then I forget how many years in a row we went to a New Year's Day bowl game. Back then, your ultimate success was not when we first started coaching. It wasn't about winning a national championship because they didn't have one. And so it was about winning. I know when I got to Florida State, we came up with the idea to win a state championship. Because there wasn't any way we was going to win a national championship. But we found out that if we were good enough to beat Florida and Miami, and we won that state championship, we were going to be in the thick of things. And I really believe what happened was they gave you an opportunity if you could develop the mental toughness and the discipline to go do it every day. And I think that was a big key for us at Alabama, Wally, and Florida State, other places we coached together, was to treat practice or treat a workout, whether it's in the weight room or whether it's in the spring practice or a weekly practice, whatever. But treat every day like it's the day that you're playing a game. Go to that mentality of trying to become a dominating player or a dominating team. And I know that was something that we both learned when we were freshmen at Alabama, because he wasn't going to let you be ordinary. He wasn't going to let you be average. And you had the ones that were there with you were guys that did the same thing you did. And toughness and, like I said, effort, those things were paramount there.
I felt like when I was at Florida State, 21 through 23 with Mike, and all these former players would come back, the guys you guys coached, we talk about a lot of things, but the one thing that always came up was two things: the mat drills in the offseason and then Sunday nights, right? So the consequence you pay for either giving up a score as a defense or a missed tackle or a missed assignment. And so what comes back to me when I talk to those guys is accountability, because even the way you structured, right? Let's say a mat drill, which is different than most places I've been, and you guys can speak to it, but you'd be set up across the line with your 4 or 5 guys. If you execute the drill perfectly and the group behind you has a mistake, the whole group pays. So I just thought the group accountability, the shared suffering, as you guys talked about it, Alabama, you guys were able to do that. And then the detail and the amount of, a lot of places we do mat drills, we just work hard. But the accountability, the details, the foot on the line, the finishing through, the flip drill at the end when you're stressed, all those guys come back to it. And then when I turn your tape on, Dad, Mickey, y'all played so damn hard, amazingly hard. Like, I've been around football all my life. The way you guys strained from snap 1 to snap, 65, it was amazing. I'm assuming you guys get that a lot. When you see older players, the guys at Florida State, is that what comes back? I know you guys won a lot of games, but what do they talk about? Is it those Sunday nights and those mat drills? Or
Well, we didn't work on Sundays. I was their day off.
Oh, Monday night. I'm sorry, Monday night.
Yeah. So we did. Now y'all, I think Mike does it on Sunday.
Right. You guys are a Monday night operation.
Yeah.
That's right.
And but I think you're right. The accountability factor can't be emphasized enough.
But they're proud they went through that. They take a lot of pride. They wouldn't, I've gone to watch college teams since I've practiced, since I've retired. Okay.
Yeah.
And they run some of the same things we ran for conditioning or whatever, and like pursuit drill, for example. I've seen more than one college team run this drill, and the kids not get lined up right, and they would not run across the line at the sideline where they're supposed to. They would stop, slow down a step or two before they reach their point where they're supposed to be, and the coaches don't say anything to them. And that our kids that while I was at Florida State, and I know when Mickey was there, they take pride in it today. They'll tell you, Coach, you remember this, you remember that, what you said to me or whatever during mat drills or wherever I was. And I know they did with Mickey too. So it was a pride thing. It still is on the kids that I was there with for 9 years. I know that.
Yeah. Now,
we didn't call that a pursuit drill. We called it a perfect play drill.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Everything had to be perfect from the time they got in the huddle till the play was over, and they were back. When they didn't stop their feet till they got back in the huddle.
Right.
And you remember one thing that we did? We challenged them in their pursuit to run 1/10 of a second faster than they'd ever run in their life, than they'd ever been. And you sit there and you say, well, that's not possible. How can you run faster than you ever been timed? I don't know, but you can do it. I've seen them do it. It's the expectation level, and then are you going to hold them accountable to it? And we did during that drill. We didn't have to raise our voices one time. After the play was over and they're back in the huddle, each coach would rate his players. Thumbs up was perfect, or thumb down, and you're going to do it again. And when a guy's name's called with a thumb down, those players would eat them alive. They were the guys holding the guy accountable. All we were doing was, no, it wasn't perfect. That's all we'd say. And if you can do it, if you can learn to run 1/10 of a second faster, you may not actually do it, but it's in your mind, if your coach said it was, that you did it. And it's amazing how many records have been broken, especially in track, because of somebody that would hold them accountable. And they prepared at that level. And so that's just like we didn't run our players very much after practice. And the reason was we told them, said, now listen, we're going to condition during practice or we're going to condition after practice. You're going to decide. So we were getting it every day during practice. So we went out there. The only ones that we had after practice were the ones that were not accountable, whether it be going to class, missing study hall, whatever it may be, something that he did or didn't do in practice. It was for disciplines. That's what we called them. And we didn't do it for punishment. We did it to raise the level of expectation and then to hold them consistent with it. And when you get a team that's player control rather than coach control, it's a whole lot better where they're holding themselves accountable rather than the coach have to do it all the time.
Go ahead, Coach.
bitching going on when the players are accounting for it.
I always thought another thing that separated you guys from other college football programs was the way you practice, particularly on Tuesdays. I've always told Dad that some of the best football I ever saw was 11 on 11. On some weeks, 11 on 11 on Tuesday at Florida State in the late 80s and early 90s was better than the games that you played. If you were playing a Memphis or somebody like that, the practice was always better than the games. They were very physical practices. I remember when I was a junior and I was out at one of y'all's practices, I was like, well, if I'm good enough to play major college football, I'm not coming here because I'm not going through this. I mean, y'all had demanding physical practices. How much of that was? I mean, obviously, Coach Bowden also played at Alabama. How much of how y'all practice was derived from your experience playing for Coach Bryant? Just the mentality and the mindset.
Well, I'll go first on that. I think it's a learned thing. It's a thing that you ingrained in you when you went to a place like Alabama and went through their program and things like that. I think that because it was always, you knew they were doing what was best for you to become a good football player, to make you go to study hall, be a good student, all those. I think those were carryovers. And so it's not so much that you try to emulate a certain person, the way they coach, but you wanted to carry their philosophy with you in the way you coach. And I think a lot of times that just turned into, we're going to be aggressive, we're going to be physical, we're going to do this and we're going to do that to make ourselves better. And Mickey gave the example of running a second faster than you really think you can. And so we used to emphasize perfect tackling, and we taught it in our drills and everything like that. Stance, I know that is one of the biggest things I take away from Alabama, and was, starting with your stance gives you a chance to be successful. And I remember Coach Claiborne at Alabama, Mickey, when we were freshmen, we had to stay out just about every Tuesday and Wednesday and do some kind of work with some of the varsity coaches. And so Coach Claiborne always kind of worked with the linebackers. And he taught me more about how to read an offensive set, who my keys were, all those kind of things that I carried with me all the way through my coaching career.
Yeah.
And so I think, those kind of things influence you more than you think as you're going through them, that you carry with you. And if you're in any kind of life job.
I agree, Wally. The mindset is so important when you carry into whatever you do it. But I was talking with Gus Malzahn a few days ago, and I mentioned to him, I said, Coach, you've had a lot of success. You've gone against Alabama a lot of times and have been successful, both as a coordinator and as a head coach. And what's the biggest takeoff that you've come, or the help that you've had with that mindset? And he said that what's the guy that he was at Alabama, Wally, and then he was a head coach at Auburn?
Pat Dye.
Pat. He said Pat Dye told him one time after he had left Alabama, and I guess he was had got through coaching at Auburn, and he was still around. And he said, Gus, let me tell you, if you're going to be successful against those people, you got to compete against them 365 days out of the year. They got to be on your mind every day. Because if it's on your mind, you're going to be doing things to help you be successful. And if you're doing that, it's going to rub off onto those players too. Now there's in Florida, Florida State's got to compete with University of Florida, and Miami. But in Alabama, there's only two schools compete against each other, and that's Alabama and Auburn. And he said, if you concentrate and work on them, I don't care what else you're working on, you got to have your mind on Alabama every day of the year. And I thought to myself, that makes a whole lot of sense. And I think Pat Dye was a common sense type player anyway. I mean, coach. And there's so much about football winning that's about doing the right thing, but it's about concentrating on it every day of the year. And I thought that was really, really important what Pat Dye told us. And if something becomes that important to you, it's going to be more important to you the day that you play too. But you worked on it every day of the week. And but I thought that was very interesting.
That brings me to a question for you two guys. Y'all identified players all your life. You've recruited guys all your life. And we were all shapes, sizes, right? We get it, different backgrounds. When you were talking last week to Pat about coaches trying to find kids who have a desperate edge, competitive, whatever you want to call it, hate losing, okay? I feel like that's not – we can try to, ingrain competitiveness. We can work ethic, all that stuff. But to me, you got to go recruit that. You got to find guys that hate losing, that love to win, that are competitive in everything they do. Were there any traits when you guys were at Florida State, other places you've all been, when you were trying to get down past great players coming through the door at Florida State, how did you guys find the guys who would thrive in that environment you're talking about, what you just described at Alabama, at Florida State? How did you guys go find that guy? And because I think there's some of that missing, right, across the country at different programs right now. Guys are happy to be there because NIL.
Kind of has to do with being lucky. When we signed Deion Sanders, I asked him one day when he was over here with Shador, he came to the football camp, summer football camp. And we got through in the room in front of it, there in front of the dressing room. And we were sitting and talking. I said, Deion, we didn't have stars back when you were coming out of high school, but where would you rank yourself then coming out? He didn't hesitate a second. He said, Coach, I would have been maybe a low 3 or a high 2 plus. And I said, you know what, Deion? That's funny. That's exactly where I would have put you. But he was not a two-star player or a 3-star player. He just had to develop. But the thing that he brought with it is something you can't coach. You can't coach instinct, and you can't coach passion beyond a certain point. If a guy's got compassion, and I remember with him talking to him when he turned pro, I said, "What's your goal for you this year?" He said, "I want to start in the NFL this year." Second year, I asked him. He said, "I want to make all pro." Third year, I asked him. He said, "I want to become the best defensive back that ever played the game." Those are pretty strong aspirations. And if he didn't have the passion that he did to work and develop, and I tell you, of all the players I coached in 45 years, I never had a guy that was more passionate about getting better every day than he was. I can tell you some stories you wouldn't even believe it. But I think that's so important when you're looking for a player that you skip over if talent is your number one thing, you're gonna have a lot of disappointments because everybody don't progress at the level that they came in with. They don't finish at that same level. In his case, he was one of the best that ever lived. And It wasn't that he was coached any better or any harder than anybody else, but he did not want to get beat. He couldn't stand it if a receiver beat him in a one-on-one drill. He'd go grab him and put him back up, get that receiver, put him back in the front of the line, and he's going to do it again because he wasn't satisfied with it. I never coached many like that.
I know there was a lot more, in-person evaluation back years ago as the calendar has changed. We'd go see games on Friday night as coaches, or we'd have more camp experiences because you had longer camps where kids might come in for 2 or 3 days. Right. So Dad, same question to you. I know you're trying to identify that, but how important was that at every place you've been to find that, the intangibles?
Well, I think you got to do a little bit of the old-fashioned recruiting. Now, I know it's changed, and I know they're sending different people out now like the pros. But back, when you start growing up as a coach and throughout your career, we always went and we wanted to find out as much in person as we could about a kid. You were there to evaluate how good he was as a player and all those kind of things. But we wanted to know if he loved football, first of all, if he was willing to sacrifice and what we were seeing at practice and what the coaches and the principal and all those kind of people were telling us about his character and all those kind of things. I think, we had to dig deeper than maybe some of them are doing now because they do it a lot off tape. And I understand the game's changed in the run is different from the old method. But I think we had to dig a little bit more. And, and camps were big for us, Mickey, back in those days to get kids to come to our camp. And so we could get them against better people besides their own teammates to see how they would compete and how they would react to different situations that would happen during those little 7-on-7s and individual drills and things that you put them through at a camp. And so I think we might be losing a little bit of that, but I think we had as a coaching staff, as coaches all over the world, in the United States, that's the way they were recruiting. And I think you got better players, and you could get carried away sometimes because he was 6'4", 220, but he didn't have what you thought he had inside. And you never were 100% sure, but you had a pretty good idea if you did enough background checking with the coaches and the players and just casual conversations with different people. And the kid would tell you a lot about those kind of things.
I remember. Go ahead, Coach. I was just going to say, I remember in 1986 going to a high school football game with you two, the Florida High. It was a bowl game. It was an end of season bowl game, and Florida High hosted a bowl game. And y'all made a decision sitting in the stands that night on Bill Reagan's. Y'all were still evaluating that late in the process, which is something that doesn't happen anymore. Do you think that sometimes schools end up out recruiting themselves out of better players because they don't allow these kids to develop fully through their senior year? Because y'all waited until Bill Reagan's 11th game of his senior year before y'all actually pulled the trigger on him. And I remember the night sitting beside both of you guys watching him. And how do you feel about the escalated recruiting cycle the way it is now, where most kids are committed before they start their senior season?
I don't like it the way it's set up. Number one, I like the developmental part. You coach your fanny off to get a kid to make the progress that you want him to. And maybe for some reason he's a little slower or a little behind. It may be like for a defensive back or a linebacker in the coverage part. But he, the physical part he's got, I think about like with Dion again, he wasn't the most physical player that we ever had as a defensive back in Florida State. But he could get him on the ground. You can find a lot of people that can do that, but a lot of them can't cover like he could. And the thing that I don't like about the transfer portal, if a kid's a late developer and you still don't have him rated where he needs to be, and he's not satisfied with his progress, and he sees himself as a second teamer, and everybody wants to be a starter. Not many second teamers are drafted in the pros, and so what they're going to do, they're going to transfer, and they got people encouraging. Used to the high school coaches, and I'm not throwing off on them, but they didn't ever want a player to transfer anyway. Stay there, and like with our quarterbacks, we used to never have a quarterback to play till he was a junior. If you think about it, I'm talking about Charlie Ward and Winky and all those guys.
Yeah.
And,
even Casey and Brad were late in their careers.
Yeah. So
Charlie came in and punted, if you remember.
that's right. His first year, he didn't even play quarterback. He was a
That's right. Can you imagine trying to get a highly recruited quarterback now in today's game to come sit, wait and punt like that? It's just, but again, I think it goes back to identifying the right kind of kid. I know the portal's going to happen. There's money, and
I agree.
I know it's changed, but I think getting the right kid. How much of this?
What are you looking for? How do you rate a kid? Is it for physical attributes? Where does mental toughness come in? He may not be the most physical guy you got, but he if he's not, he better be strong mentally. And I think it's the emphasis in a kid that you're looking for. And I know it's a different world nowadays. I'm glad don't have to do the things that a college coach has to do now, Wally. But I don't see it as football being better now than it was back then when we coached.
And Dad, you guys took. So I'm gonna go back. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
When Mickey made me think, some of the guys, and Pat has a lot better memory than I do because he was a little bit older, but y'all made a living off guys that I thought were an inch short, maybe, or whether it's Paul McGowan or I guess probably even Leroy might not. I go back and watch Leroy's tape, but
for every Dan Footman there was a Henry Osazuski, right? I mean, there was, y'all had complementary parts. For every Deion Sanders, there's a Bill Reagan's. For every Joey Adenaya, there's a Pat Tomberlin type of thing.
No doubt.
So was that by design? So when you go out and you find those guys, Kirk Carruthers, okay, he's undersized, he's Michigan, he's way outside the norm. What put you over the top with those kids? Was it just, hey, they were that good in that size package, or was it some of those intangibles? Can you remember in some of those cases when you guys took guys that were not ideal size or parameters, whatever?
Well, Kurt was a good example. Todd Rebo was a good example for my position. That people probably weren't big enough, fast enough, and strong enough, but mentality-wise,
you're measuring that with, Wally.
Pardon?
It's according to what you're measuring, that size.
Exactly right.
Yep,
exactly right. And and to me, I always, I'd love to go watch practices in high school and find, if I was recruiting a guy, and find out how tough he was. You go during 2 days or something like that, or during their playoff practices, and when they really having to practice, and the coaches are letting them get after and play a little bit. You find out about these kids, and it's like we're talking about. That's when you're recruiting the will to win. That's when you're recruiting if they're don't have the will to win. And I know. When I was at Florida State, I lost a big old offensive tackle to Auburn because we drug our feet and wouldn't make that decision as a staff, as an offensive staff. And I was just a recruiting coach, And I told him, I said, I've seen the kid practice. I've seen him sweat and, and do the things he's got to do. And I've talked to everybody in that school and the coach. I respect the high school coach. And we didn't take him, and he went to Auburn and made All-American. Well, our coaches, they didn't want that kid. And so you still made mistakes, is what I'm trying to say, and trying to get those kind of kids. But we got a lot of them at Florida State.
Yeah, I think that was Steve Wallace, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong on that, but I do remember when you were recruiting that kid when I was a kid. Because I paid attention to everything recruiting wise that was going on. All right. So I do want to get into a little bit of Florida State. You both ended up at Florida State in '85. What was your path to Florida State? You both met Coach Bowden at different times along the course of your football lives. How did you end up in Tallahassee in 1984, Coach Andrews? What led you? What led you to Tallahassee?
Well, actually, I was without a job. I'd left University of Florida and went to Arizona to the USFL, and I had a 2-year contract. And we get there, and of course, we lost a lot more games than we won, and that didn't make it a good job right there. But they just Wally was there. He knows. They decided the owner of the Wranglers was a guy that was a real estate guy in San Francisco area, and the owner of the Chicago Blitz was a heart surgeon there in Tallahassee in
Phoenix.
What was the name of that town, Wally?
Phoenix.
Yeah. He was in another little town connected with it.
Probably Scottsdale.
Yeah. They got to talking and decided that the guy that owned the Chicago Blitz lived in Phoenix. Decided, I want to take over. I want to bring my team to Phoenix, and I want the Wranglers to go to Chicago. Well, I had decided a long time ago I wasn't never going to coach at a school north of the Mason-Dixon line. That just wasn't me, I was a big family guy, and I didn't want to be that far away from mom and daddy, Diane's mom and daddy, and all, and the grandkids, whatever. And so I just told them, said, listen, I'm not going to move. I got another year on my contract. You can do what you want to. And they decided that they would pay me for that year since I was already on contract. So I didn't move. And Wally and I lived next door to each other in Phoenix. We bought houses. I don't know how we ended up getting them together, but we did, Wally. And so Wally didn't go with them either. And he talked with George, and the head coach for the Blitz, and George hired him to stay on at Phoenix. So I went that whole season without a coaching job. In fact, I got to see my son play in high school. He was a senior at the high school there in Phoenix area.
Dobson Mustangs, Coach. The Dobson Mustangs.
Yeah. And then what it turned out, actually, Hootie Ingram called me. Coach Bowden didn't. Wanted to know if I'd be interested in coming to Florida State. And it was funny. The old guy that was on our staff, Mike Bugar, lived across the street from Wally and I. He had coached it. No, he had played at Florida State. And he was wanting to go back and whatever. And of course, we didn't have any other coaching openings. But anyway, Coach Bowden called me then after I talked with the defensive, who am I trying to say? Hootie, with Hootie. Anyway, we got together, and at Christmas I came down and interviewed with Coach Bowden, and actually the funny thing is, we had the interview over there in McDonald's across from the football stadium. And so anyway, I took the job and moved there. And in fact, Diane and the kids stayed out in Phoenix, finished the school year. And I was batching it for about 3 or 4 months. Finally, we got to move or whatever. But that's how I ended up at Florida State. And by the grace of God, I was able to stay there the rest of my coaching career. And I went there. I thought I'd be there 3 or 4 years because that's about the normal time that a coach would stay.
Still is.
Yeah, I know it. But anyway, I get to Florida State, and Wally, you ended up going to, what's the name of that college out there in Texas that you went to?
Oh, I was at Lamar before I came to the Wranglers.
Right.
Yeah.
And then after you left there, did you go to a college out in?
No, I came to Florida State. No, I came to Florida State after the second year.
Yeah.
When
George
Allen.
Our linebacker coach, McDowell, gets the head job at UCF.
Yeah.
And so I get Coach Bowden to bring in Coach Burnham to be our linebacker coach. And just did a whale of a job coaching linebackers. And so Wally leaves there. You went to Iowa State?
I went to South Carolina with Brad Scott.
Right, with Brad. Yeah. But anyway, after he retired, we would see each other all along and have some old memories or whatever. But how many years were you at Florida State?
9 years.
Yeah, I knew it was almost 10.
85 through 93.
All right, and you guys rode together just about every day to work during those 9 years. How many sentences were actually said over those 9 years? Outside of good morning, what were the conversations like? Because I think it would be. I think it would have.
We took turns driving.
We had more conversations coming home after practice than we did early in the morning.
That's the truth. But those were great times. We had a great, and the good thing about it, we were winning during those times.
That's right. That made it better.
A whole lot better.
Yeah.
All right. So first of all, what stood out about Coach Bowden to you as a head coach and a leader, and what kind of man was he like to work for? What was your experience with him? I think a lot of people would love to hear y'all talk about that because both of you had different experiences with him. Both of you got to know him differently. Dad, I think you met him back in college for the first time. Was when you met him when he was the head coach at Samford and you were in transition from Alabama to Samford. Just talk a little bit about Coach Bowden and the impact he had on both of you.
Okay. Well, you're right. I dropped out of Alabama and I stayed out and I got a call one day and it was Coach Bowden. And Coach Bowden used to come to all the 2 springs I was at Alabama. He'd always come to a couple of practices, and the coaches would tell him, different things about different kids, and especially if one left, and which I did after the 61 season. And so anyway, I get a call from Coach Bowden, and he says, introduces himself and says, I'd like for you to come up and talk to me in Birmingham. And he said, I know you're from Pell City, which is 30 miles away, blah, blah, you know that. He gave me that spiel. And so I go up and to Birmingham and go to Coach Bowden's house and talk to him and everything. And so I go back home because I could have gone to Jacksonville State, Southern Mississippi, and some places like that, but I really liked Sanford, and so I ended up going there. And I just always kept in touch with Coach Bowden. He always kept in touch with me. A letter, and I had letters I'd send to him, and we, as a family, would go visit different than in Florida. We'd always go by Tallahassee. You guys remember that? And so we'd always go by Tallahassee and stop by and say hello or whatever. But Coach Bowden was probably the best version of a leader of young people that I've ever been around. He was way ahead of what the kids and the coaches on his staff were thinking about. And but he was a lot, and Mickey will agree with this, I know. Coach Bowden had the reputation of being, not a real, he was a tough guy. And he would come in and he would talk about how we coached that day, how the players respond. He'd just pick out an individual sometimes and say, so-and-so wasn't very tough today in that 3-on-3 or goal line, whatever it might be. And but he treated people like he wanted to be treated. And he was tough on them. And tough on everybody, and made everybody responsible. And I was in charge of the dorm when I first got there. I think that was the last coach hired was the guy that got that job. It wasn't a great job. So anyway, it was better than a lot of other things. And so we had a disturbance up there, and I didn't live on there. We didn't live there, and but anyway, I didn't know about it until the next morning, and nobody called me, the dorm director that was living there. And so Coach Bowden calls me in and says, look, we can't have that. He says, you're in charge. He said, you got to stay in charge. Well, I know what he meant. I better get going and make sure nothing like that happens, which, but he made you responsible. And, he never questions anything that you were doing. Yeah, as long as you're doing it right, and so he was a big influence on me on how and I tried to act like him in some ways and the way he treated people, but I know I came up short. I really did, but he was a great man to work for. I'll tell you that.
Coach, what about you? What stood out to you about Coach Bowden as a coach and as a leader?
Well, I think the first thing, he had a unique ability as a head coach to hire you, tell you what he wanted, make sure that you were doing the right things when he gave you that responsibility, and then he'd let you coach. He didn't tell you how to do it. I know the first spring I went in up there in '84, he had hired an offensive coordinator that ran the not the speed option, but the freeze option. And he wasn't real big on the option stuff, And so he just kind of let him go. And he spent all his time in my meeting room. I'd look back there, and every day that we had a meeting, he was in the room listening. He's on the back row, listening to everything I said, going over on film. And he did that the entire spring. And I guess he said, well, I think these guys know what they're doing. They're on solid ground. They're teaching fundamentals, which when he brought me in, he said, the number one thing I want you to do when you get here, I want you to play one defense the entire spring for the 20 days. And, well, when he told me that, I was tickled to death. because that's exactly what I was going to do, because I'm more of the type that believes in whipping you with fundamentals than with trickery. He said, I don't want you game planning during the spring. And we even on the goal line, we played 44 cover one on the goal line. That was the defense that we called at that time. And we did it on long yardage. We did it every down. And finally, about the last week or two, I said, Coach, we're going to have to develop a goal line defense, and I'd like to be able to add that these last 2 weeks. And he let me do it. And of course, that's the thing. If you know anything about Florida State, to me, the two main things that we used back then to develop players was the off-season program, the match, and usually went about 15 days in that. But we did it at 5:45 in the morning. You know, there wasn't any. People didn't have to miss workouts to go take reset test or meetings or anything like that. Those active meetings wasn't up at that time of day working, but we were. And so anyway, that next fall, he hardly ever came. You know, he had that big old tower between the two fields. If you remember how we had 3 fields before they changed the configuration with a new football complex and the indoor workout area facility. And but anyway, from then on, he said, listen, you guys know what you're doing. I don't see anything that I can do to help you. I'm going to spend my time working with the offense. Because after that season, the offensive coordinator, I think he went to East Carolina, maybe as a head coach. But anyway.
Yeah, Art Baker.
Yeah, Art Baker. Good man, good coach. But he said, the only time I'm going to have to meet with y'all is when I see something that I don't like or that maybe y'all are overlooking. And occasionally he would call us in and he said, now look, I just been looking at that and I think maybe if you tried this, I want you to take a look at it. And we always did that. We didn't always do it because, maybe we didn't figure that it fits what we were doing. But he never interfered. He said, I'm not going to mess with you unless you need help. And so our staff was strong enough, from the defensive line coach to ends to linebackers and the secondary, that we just worked so good together because we had like minds. And I think the training that Wally and I had together was a big part of it because, our deal was that we wanted to stop the offense from running the football. And if we could force you to throw the ball, our DBs weren't always good enough to beat you, but our front pass rush was. And we expected just as much out of those rushers as we did the cover guys. And we did that, we put that emphasis and helped develop team responsibility. And I think that was a huge part of us being successful through the years.
Yep. So in '84, I believe Coach y'all went 8-3-1. Dad, you came in '85. Y'all were 8-3. Won the bowl game against Oklahoma State, Decatur Bowl. I think they made 9-3. Then obviously '86. A lot of people thought y'all took a step backwards at 6-4-1. Play Indiana in the All-American Bowl in Birmingham on a very, very cold night. Finished 7-4-1. The next year, the dynasty starts. That's the first year, '87, start knocking off those 10-win seasons. When did you guys think, before the dynasty started, was there a moment in '85, '86, or maybe even early in '87 where you guys said, hey, we're on to something here. We've got a chance to have one of the best programs in college football?
Go ahead, Wally.
Well, that's kind of hard to answer in a way. But going back to recruiting, we knew we were getting better players than each year. I guess the state of Florida was just producing more. Florida, University of Florida, either was on probation or coming off probation. And so I think we picked up some talent that way. And then we started, maybe not started is the right word, but we were having success in the Miami area and in the Panhandle. So we had a lot of success in different parts of the state where there were a lot of players. And so I think once you start getting those kind of players, like Mickey was talking about Dion, you talk about the quarterbacks that were coming in, and you talk about the offensive linemen that we were getting, the Mike Tomlins and the people like that, and the wide receivers. I mean, the Fab Four, and there's a lot more than four of them. So we were getting elite people at certain positions, and not all of them. And then you get a Derek Brooks and a Marvin Jones and Shelton Thompsons and people like that. You're getting the cream of the crop. And so I think you could see the light at the end of the tunnel that we were going to start having some serious football players come play at Florida State.
What about you, Coach Andrews? Was there a moment you thought, hey, we're on to something here?
Yeah, because it was hard to recruit at Florida State those first few years. We didn't have many what you'd call great players. And but what we had done, we had built the foundation. We'd start to get a good player here, there. And then that one year when Dion and Sammy Smith, several of those guys played in the All-Star game in Florida. And they decided they were going to come together to Florida State. Isaac Hayes, just several really, really good players, top-notch players. And when they came in and we started winning, we were able to sign, I guess you'd call more 4 or 5-star players than we were able to prior to that. And, we learned at Alabama that Coach Bryant could take an average player and develop and turn him into a really good player. I mean, he just proved that. And that's what we tried to do, and we were able to do. And we practiced, like you said earlier, so much against each other during those times that we made each other get better every day during the week. And that was our deal with them, Let's don't wait till Saturday to see how much we improve. Let's improve daily. And so we set some goals for them to somewhere along in there. We talked about improving 2% a day. And so we started getting that. And as hard as we worked them, those guys, they just bought into it. They were the kind of guys that you wanted to have around you. You enjoyed coaching them. And I'm going to tell you what now, we had a good time coaching with those kids. And we worked them hard now. And I'm sure during the years there that we had some prospects that were listening to the other schools telling us, don't go there. They work you too hard. Well, and that probably worked on a few of them, which was good because we didn't need that kind anyway. And I think probably as an overall thing, the mentality that developed, the expectations started occurring at the level that, of beating Florida and Miami, of winning the ACC when we finally got into a conference. And during those years, we practiced against better players than we played against most of the time. And the competition that we had made us get even better. It built the confidence. And the team, I talk with so many of the players that talk about the early days at Burt Reynolds Hall. And what was a dorm before that, Wally?
Coble Terrace.
Yeah, Coble. It wasn't a fancy place at all. But we became family during those times. And I really believe this. That's one of the worst decisions that the NCAA ever made. Maybe even worse than the transfer portal and the NIL. It's when they took away the dorms.
Yep.
But I hear all those kids every time they get together. They just have a ball because they love each other from the times that, not just the times that they went through preparation, but the times they had when they were up in Burt Reynolds Hall and Coble Terrace.
Well, Coach, you mentioned having competitive kids and needing competitive kids. And one of the things that I thought made you guys different, and looking back now over the course of working in football, covering football, y'all staff, that staff was very competitive against each other. Offense versus defense. Y'all used to get after each other on the practice field like y'all were enemies. But then at noon in the off season, if you're on Pensacola watching, I sitting in those Osceola offices on the Pensacola Street, I would see you and Dad and Dave Van Hallinger and Billy Sexton and Wayne McDuffie and Todd Stroud getting your run in the off season. I think the players learned from you guys in that regard, where you and Dad would be after Billy and Wayne during the practice, and they'd be after you guys. And then, but off the field, you guys were buddies and friends. I think the players saw that. I don't think that happens on every staff. Talk about how.
I think you're right.
Go ahead, Coach.
No, I just said I think you're right. I think that kids understand. They can see and they can develop opinions about what they see, and I think it's very important. I don't know that your whole staff's got to be buddy, but we certainly were buddy most of the time with most of our staff, and I think the kids felt.
Yeah, I always thought it was unique. Dad, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think this goes back to the expectations that Coach Bowden had. He had a great feel for our staff, and because they were, a couple of things that came up, and he would talk about that with the staff, and nothing bad, just a couple of things that he had seen or heard or whatever. And so a lot of that came from his leadership. And I think a lot of it came from a bunch of guys that just wanted to win and get along, have fun. And, the job's a hard job anyway. So you can make it much harder if you don't have good relationships with the people, because you're going to compete offense and defense and all those kind of things. And so make it as competitive as you can. Yet at the same time, when you walk off that field, like you tell those kids, you might have a little shoving match with this guy, but after practice is over, go talk to him and don't let that fester and become a problem for the offense or the defense or whatever it might be.
I think what was unique about your staff, and again, I've coached a long time, played. Mickey's right. You can't fool kids, right? They see all through that. You cannot fool your kids, no matter what it is you're trying to put in front of them. And the second thing is you guys love those kids so hard. When the former players come back, you guys coached them really hard. We know that. It was a really tough program. You couldn't be thin-skinned. You had to be willing to hear the truth about your game. And you guys were sometimes brutal in your delivery, I thought. But you guys loved them so much, and they did. I mean, that when you coached them hard and you were honest with them, but you also found a way to put your arm around their neck on the way off the field. Or I feel like every kid had a nickname at Florida State. I mean, again, it seems small, but it's not small. It's a way you build connection. It's a way. So I thought you guys loved them so hard, on top of coaching them so hard, and I think that's not always easy to do.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, Shane, because I'm having lunch with Odell Haggins the other day, and Terrence Knighton is sitting at the table. I went over there for the little coaches' lunch, and they had to kick off the year in my last official act as a member of the Osceola. So I'm sitting there talking Odell, and he's telling Terrence Knighton who I am, and he goes, Pat's dad is the guy that recruited me to Florida State, is my first position coach before they moved me to defensive line. And after that, it had nothing to do with football. In fact, he went on to tell Terrence, I used to go out to Coach Burnham's house all the time, and Miss Barbara would have this for me or that for me. And so, and I remember, Todd Rebo and Travis Sherman coming to me one day. It's after I came back to finish my degree at Florida State, and they'd had a particularly bad practice, and they were both freshmen, I believe, at least no older than redshirt freshmen. And Sherman goes, man, he goes, I hate your dad, but I love your dad. He said, he had me crying today. We had a bad practice. He got us out to practice and did a machine gun drill. I can't lift both my shoulders. And then 24 hours later, Travis and Dad were tight from the recruiting trail. But anyway, y'all did have a unique relationship with your players, because I don't know a lot of staffs that could get away with pushing them the way you guys did on the field, in the mats, in all season, but had the ability to relate to your guys. And the reverence they have for you guys today is unbelievable. I mean, if I run into a former player, they ask about Dad all the time. I mean, how's your dad doing? I was talking to Matt Fryer today. Second question out of his mouth was, how's your dad doing? So I think it's interesting that you guys found a really unique balance and being able to push kids beyond their limits, but still have the admiration, respect, and probably more so than anything else. And I'm sure it's not consistent with every kid that's played there, but by and large, those kids loved you guys and still talk about you today. And I think that's probably the biggest compliment y'all could get from those guys.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, that's no doubt. We feel the same way about those guys. They made an enjoyable ride. It was hard, but it was enjoyable, and you built relationships. And it's just their families now, a majority of them, and some of their kids, and we got that's a long time ago, in 1985 when I went there, and Mickey went in 84. There's a lot of grandkids that our kids that we coach have now. So it's changed, but we still stay in touch.
Yeah. Did y'all ever think that you got all right? So 87, the team was really good. 88, really good. 90, 91. A lot of people think 92 was the greatest team that's ever played at Florida State. Did you guys ever think that you were going to cross the finish line and get that national championship for yourselves, for Coach Bowden, for those players? Or did you all, so many heartbreaking memories. I can remember the first wide right walking off. Tallahassee was like a ghost town that next Sunday. It was like, I can remember going back down to campus, and it was cold and a little bit gray, and it was like cups flowing through down Pensacola Street, like old grass in the westerns, tumbleweed. There was nobody on the streets. Did you guys ever think that you'd get to that national championship?
Well, I don't really know how to answer that. I think we thought we could, and it would happen. But, it's just like when you got your goal, you set your goal to be the very best in the nation. That's a that's a high achieving right there. That's a hard climb. And a lot of things have to fall in place for it to happen. And, we won 2 national championships during that time, but we played in 3 more that we lost. And had we had playoffs back during those early 90s or 80s, we probably would have won another 2 or 3 in there. But it just didn't happen. And it goes with the old thing about being at your best when it counts the most. And how do you know you're at your best? Who keeps you from being the best? Well, most of the time it's you. You got to start with, you got to start look at the man in the mirror first. And then you go, why didn't we get it done? Where did we break down? What have we got to do? Do we need to change something in the off season? Do we need to change part of our defense playbook? And but I think probably what we did, we found a lot of pleasure in being one of the best, even though we weren't the best all the time. You ain't gonna stay number one all the time. And we found out once we got there, it's pretty darn hard staying there just like it was getting there. And it's just there's got to be so many things fall in place for you to get that top prize. And when you look at it, it ain't one coach, it ain't the coach, it ain't the player. That find out some of the times that the most important people are the people that are training them. I'm talking about the training room or in the equipment room. People that are involved in the academic part, the cafeteria. Everybody's got to be a part of it. And sometimes it falls in place and sometimes it doesn't. I remember in 1962, I think it was, at Alabama, we lost one game, and that was to Georgia Tech. We went for 2 and didn't make it. Or we'd have won that one. It would have been 2 out of 3 years, or 4 years, 3 out of 4 years. And I guess the thing about Coach Bowden, he was smart enough to organize, and he was so different from Coach Bryant as far as, Wally, you'll agree too, I'm sure, about the physical presence on the field. Coach Bryant, when he'd come down off that tower back then, practice fields were over there between those girls' dorms. You remember, Wally? And he would get on the tower so that he could see more, and he was able to correct more. If he's on the field, he's isolated in one area all the time. And I'm gonna tell you, when he found something he didn't like, you could see splinters flying as he's coming down that tower, because all he had was an old, like a ladder going up to it at that time, made out of wood. But Coach Bowden was amazing, and he didn't do a lot of on the field coaching. He did most of his coaching inside with the coaches, and when he called a player into his office to talk to him. I don't know if there'll ever be another one just like Coach Bowden, because he did it the right way. And I know the 26 years I coached at Florida State, I had no intentions of being there 26 years. I didn't go there to be there in 26 years. but I couldn't come up with a good enough reason to leave. You know,
Yeah.
where was a job better than the one I had? I even turned down a couple of head jobs because those jobs weren't as good as the one I had. But anyway, and that's what Coach Bowden used to always say. You remember, Wally? You say, if you want a better job, do a better job at the one you got. And he was so right with that.
Yeah.
Hey, Dad, did you ever think y'all get to finally break through, get the national championship?
I did. I really did after the 87 season. I think we're starting getting close, and every year, wide right, drop 2-point conversion at home against Miami, those kind of things. I just got a feeling that we had that type of team, and that the coaching staff had been together for a long time, as I remember. And I just felt like it was that Florida State's time was coming. And I always felt like that would happen, and it did. I want to mention one thing, another story that Mickey made me think of about the tower and Coach Bryant. Mickey, I don't know where the first spring after our freshman year, we had the first big scrimmage on Saturday, and it was Boosters Day, where they had invited all the boosters, and they were all around the field where we were going to scrimmage. Anyway, Bryant was up on the tower. I don't know where you were on the first team, freshman team started against the first team varsity team. We were freshmen in our freshman year, and they were in whatever year they were in. And I don't know where you were on the team I was on or not, but the group I was with went out first against the varsity, and so they gave us the ball first. I think it's like the 35-yard line, and we ended up about on the 10-yard line, minus 10. We were going backwards, and we'd punt, and then they'd score, and so Coach Bryant made us stay out there the whole scrimmage, and for so many plays, for a half or something. I don't remember what exactly it was. And he was running he had the red team, he had the white team, then he had the blue darters, and, we were running against all of them. And then they ran us till we dropped in front of all those boosters. Were you on that team? Were you on my team, or were you on not?
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I just remember. I remember.
Yeah.
When we got through, and I think that was when Coach Bowden had a meeting, or maybe he had it. He made it up like he had a meeting, and he left, and he told the coaches what to do with us after he left. But they about ran us to death after that. Didn't Wally? That
might have been the same one.
If it was Pat James, whoever it was, he called the red team. They'd raise their hands. He said, "Y'all going in." That's the white team. Then he got down to the blue darters.
That's the same day.
Team.
Yeah.
And he said,
I remember y'all told that story several times. It's awesome.
He said, "You folks that are out here are the ones I want to work with now." And boy, did they work with us. I remember that, Wally.
Yeah.
That was a long day.
They did.
All right, we've kept y'all for. Go ahead, Dad. I was going to say we kept y'all.
I was going to say after. Well,
go ahead.
I was just going to say one other thing. Once we got through that scrimmage, they made us all get out. We had to do sit-ups and push-ups.
Yeah.
And so nobody could do them. So every coach got a guy. And if you couldn't do a sit-up, they grabbed you by the face mask and pull you up and push you down. And if you couldn't do a push-up, they grabbed you by the back of the collar and back of the shoulder pad.
And weren't very gentle with that.
I bet they weren't. All right, so we kept you.
Anyway.
We got a couple of quick questions. We're going on almost 2 hours. I told Shane before we started this, we could do segments of this show. We probably should have. But all right, so we're gonna ask you a couple questions Shane sent me. I'm gonna change them a little bit. Who was the best player you coached? And for you, Coach Andrews, you can't say Dion and you can't say Terrell Buckley. And for you, Dad, you cannot say Marvin Jones or Derek Brooks because those are national award winners. They're perceived to be four of the greatest players that have ever played college football, let alone at Florida State. Outside of those four guys, Dad, who was the best player and I don't even think it has to be necessarily that you coached him, that the best player that played at Florida State outside of Derek Brooks and outside of those four guys, because they're easy answers.
Yeah, they were. You took that right out of our hands.
Yeah.
That's a lot of guys to choose. That's a long list to go through in your mind.
I know. I mean, it is. Yeah, it really is. And you should bring us back to answer that question.
We can do that. I mean, you got a lot. You got McGowan and Rebo and Carruthers and I mean, there were a bunch of great. You got a bunch of great guys. Secondary's got a bunch of great guys. That, or let me ask you this. Maybe this is a better way to put it. Who is the most underappreciated player, guys that does not get the credit he deserves from either Florida State fans or just the fact that he didn't get a lot of accolades or awards? Who was one of the more underappreciated players you guys had play at Florida State for you? And this would be in your position group. Somebody that you play for you.
I think Kurt Carruthers would be one of those guys, that did a great job for us. Heck, one night against Auburn, I think he made 18 individual tackles, and he was crazy. He'd run you crazy because you didn't ever know where he's going to go. You coach him hard all week, and heck, he'd be doing something crazy out there on the field. But, he's the kind of guy that I think would fit in that category. Kelvin Smith was, a really good football player for us. Todd Rebo did a good job for us. I mean, I don't know that none of them were superstars, just good old football players.
Yeah. What about you, Coach?
Well, I don't know about the best. I think one of the things that was most important to me through those years was the tough players. I think about Bill Reagan. I think about Attic Williams. I think about Bill. And I think about Shiver.
Yeah.
I love coaching strong safeties because in the defense that we played at that time, they were really linebackers that just lined up a little deeper and we played a lot of zone then. And but I love the guys that when that ball was snapped, that was hoping it was going to be run and they could go tack the line of scrimmage. When we played against folks that ran the sweep, this is not dirty football. This is tough football. But if it came to the strong side, our strong safeties had to go up and attack the puller, who was usually a big offensive guard coming around there. And that was a big part of our offense's main play. They really emphasized it. And what we started doing, rather than taking them on the hip or in the shoulder, whatever, we aimed for their outside knee. Because we didn't have to make a tackle, but we had to have containment. We had to turn the ball back inside. And those guys that I mentioned, and especially old Shiver, they loved it. They didn't mind. A lot of defensive backs would just cringe if they were, because it was going to be a big time collision when they and the guards made contact, and they knew that we were coming for their outside knee, so they were going to get down with their helmet and their shoulder pads, and there was going to be a big collision there. And I guess Shiver probably enjoyed it as much as any of them. He loved it every time he ran that sweep. And all four of those guys right there. I never did go to war. I never have been in a foxhole. But if I was, I'd take any four of those guys into the foxhole with me, because I know that they would fight to the death. And so toughness was such a huge factor. And I could coach toughness. Now, that's the only way I played at Alabama. I surely wasn't as talented as a lot of them. But I guess probably Leroy Butler comes to my mind as a guy. I remember his senior year. In trying to select our four defensive backs, we had three of those guys at the same position, free safety or strong safety, whatever. And so one of them was Leroy, and he didn't need to be involved in a lot of deep pass responsibility. So what we did, we changed our defense coverage to a quarter halves alignment, so that Leroy was like a strong safety all the time, but he was always rolled up on the weak side, and he used to just wear those receivers out. He would turn them inside out, and I think he ended up with like 10 or 12 interceptions and a first-round draft choice. But the free safety was Dedrick Dodge, the little skinny rascal that was a football player. And then we left Reagan's at the strong safety. So we took three of our four players and spread them out. And I'm trying to remember. I don't know if Dion was a senior then, was on that team or not, but it seemed like he did, because we was asking him to play half the field on a wideout. And if you remember, we had the folks that were going to take care of number two. If there's a drop back pass, we let the linebacker take him if he went vertical. Yeah, if he went vertical. If it's a play action pass, our strong safety would take it. So that freed up the field side corner to have to play that one receiver all over the field. And ended up being good for us. But and I thought that was one of the things that we tried to do all the time, was get your best. Coach Bowden was always saying, get your best football players on the field. And that's kind of how we did that. And Leroy goes up there and ends up, I guess he made all pro up there with the Green Bay Packers, but he was a good football player.
Yeah, I think he's an NFL Hall of Famer now, isn't he?
I don't know if it's a question, but
all right. Listen, we can ask about 100 more questions. I kind of want to get into some other stuff, but we're at 2 hours, so we'll go ahead and call. Would you guys like to come back and talk more with us before the football season starts? Because we got a lot more questions, and we can do it. We can do it a lot shorter than this. Just what we need to do. But yeah, listen, I appreciate you guys coming on, and I think people are going to find this conversation fascinating. I'd love to have both of you back on before the season to talk about what you guys think the keys to Mike Norvell turning this program around are going to be, because I know you guys have seen a lot of football, Florida State football over the last several years. Would love to get your thoughts on that. I'd love to get your thoughts on how you would adjust coaching today's practices, because they're totally different than what you guys did. But we'd love to have you back on. But I want to thank both of you for coming on. And like Shane and I have talked, you guys bring a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of experience, and I think people will really enjoy hear what you guys had to say about your experience at Alabama, Florida State. And so we want to thank you so much for that. Shane, you got anything?
Thanks for joining, guys. Appreciate it.
Yep. And listen, we hope if we hope if you've been watching this podcast, you've enjoyed it as much as we did, and we will be back on Wednesday with another edition of the Burnham Brothers College Football Podcast. I'd like to thank Dad and Coach Andrews for joining us today. It's been fascinating, and we look forward to having you guys on again, guys.
Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.